Hey everyone, I'm Larry Waddell, president and founder of Prism Inspire, and I'm here to talk about something I built using N8N and a bunch of other tools that I'm really excited about, and it's a content production workflow, specifically a blog writer. So I'm a name it what it does kind of guy, so this is called the blog writer. But the question is that you might have is, well, why did I do this? So part of my thing in my consultancy is helping business owners, agency owners, thought leaders, folks who are innovating either in business services or agencies, helping them grow, push past plateaus around growth and leveling up management teams and all that kind of thing. I was an executive for a long time at a fast growing agency. I was COO and then EVP of business development. And I left that to launch my own consultancy, helping agency owners and business service owners grow about a year and a half ago. And in that time, I've just obviously, as with all of us, seen these tremendous, incredible innovations happening around AI and workflow automation and all these things. And I wanted to go headfirst into that and figure it out for myself as part of my consulting work in terms of helping me provide value to my clients, but also looking at ways in which I can then bring tools and technology to my clients to help them with what they do. I do not want to be an agency. I am not an agency, but I wanted to tell you about why I chose to build this blog writer. Now, unlike a lot of other folks sharing things about tools, I have a couple caveats. One is I am not a developer. I did some coding way back in the day at Accenture, let's call it a long time ago, but I'm a process guy. And I like to sort of take things apart and put them back together again logically. I'm a whiteboard guy. I like that sort of a thing. But I'm definitely not a pro at this. I'm, maybe more than an amateur, but I am certainly not at the vanguard of those out there doing insane things with some of these automation tools. But what I will say though is, unlike others who share information around the things that they're building, you might already have noticed I haven't shown you I haven't shown you the tools yet. And I am very purposeful about that. I want to walk you through why I've done what I've done and how I went about and what my goals were. I think that's sometimes a thing missing in some of the videos around, like all the nodes and all the spinning dials, like, oh my God, I got 400 nodes running. Look at this. It's all tool porn, which is fine. It's eye candy. I love it too. But when I think about folks who are like me, maybe a year and a half ago, where I knew almost nothing but any of this, and I was trying to get my brain around it, it was a little tricky sometimes to sort of watch some folks who were just killing it jump right into all the spinning dials and the nodes and all this stuff happening. And I didn't really have the why behind it or what the goals were. And, heaven forbid we talk about KPIs. So I wanted to do that a little bit differently. Now, some of you might be like, yeah, shut up, just get to the spinning dials and the nodes, and that's cool too. You could fast forward this part. But for everybody else, I wanted to walk you through for a few minutes just sort of why I did this and what my goals were. So the first thing is, I like I said, I'm not an agency, right? I working with clients. Some of them are agencies, some of them are digital agencies, but others are not. And what I noticed is that for my non-agency clients, they were kind of jammed up. So they're busy. These are relatively small businesses, and their CEOs are oftentimes the founders, and they're running at full speed. They have a tight team, and they're trying to, conquer the world and do all this sort of stuff. And they have SMEs who don't always have the time to write. But what I discovered was that these SMEs have just oodles of experience, expertise. They have opinions and POVs on things. But some of them suffered from the blank sheet of paper problem. They looked at the blank sheet of paper and were like, how do I get started? How do I share what I know? Others just simply didn't have the time. They were fully utilized. They were pitching, they're traveling, they're at conferences, whatever they're doing, but they didn't have the time to dig into blogs and to start writing. And as part of my work for them, that was something I had prescribed for them to help them with their growth. The other reason why I wanted to do this is because I wanted to see if I could. And in time, in other videos I'd love to share with you, I'll describe other things that I've built that I did just to see if I could do it. And this was one of those things. And it helped me learn a bunch about how these tools fit together, about what their capabilities are. And again, I'm by no means a pro at this, but by trying to do these little projects as I've moved along, it's just taught me a bunch of things. Who could be an executive, could be a business owner, could have been somewhere, in the hierarchy where maybe other folks who reported to them might have done things like this. And, maybe, you might not think of yourself as somebody who could sort of jump in and start building out some stuff. Well, you can. And that's why, again, I wanted to spend a little bit of time on the why behind this. But the other reasons why I did it is it's fun. This is a fun part of my job, helping my clients and helping myself, and digging into these tools and learning how they fit together. That just sort of tickles a thing inside of me that I've always enjoyed. So I just like building things, and this is another example of how one can do that. And so the thinking was, if I can do this for my clients, maybe I can do it for myself, because I too am really busy. I have ideas. I also want to get them out. And I thought, man, this could be a win-win-win. So that was the sort of the why behind this. So stepping back, and this is where my process part of my DNA comes in. So happy to jump in and rip and shred, and I've certainly done that. But here, I did want to step back and kind of think through what I wanted it to do. Now, you can think of this as a spec. So for all you process folks out there, you can kind of start there. What is the nature of the problem to be solved? What's the current state of the art? What's the current state around how it's getting done or not getting done, as the case may be. And then ultimately, at a high level, at the conceptual level, what do you want it to do? So I wanted to start with the SMEs, right? So I wanted to start with my clients. I wanted to start with the knowledge, start with just the deep expertise that is not getting out into the universe. And I wanted to start there. So what if we had an interview and we recorded it? Okay, cool. We can save the transcript from it. Again, this is all thanks to modern tools. Then we can use a custom GPT or a Gemini Gem or something like that. And we can add to its knowledge base something about our ICP or the personas or something like that. So conceptually, all right, well, if we get the transcript down and we have something that knows a little bit about what the company does, what my client does, and how it does it, and who it's supposed to be doing it for, maybe it can help parse through the transcript somehow and then suggest topics or things for us to consider in terms of writing the blog. And then out of that, we'll select a topic. So the human in the loop part of that. Now this, as you can see, parts of this can obviously be automated, but I wanted humans involved in sort of deciding which topics to select and why. But here I work with my client and the SME to select a particular topic and see what we can do. And then I wanted a writer of some kind that could be trained on my client's writing style. Again, the ICPs or personas. There could be, maybe ways to humanize the writing so it doesn't sound so obviously like an AI did it, that kind of a thing. Then do some light SEO. So again, I'm not an SEO. I've worked with them for years. I want to do some light SEO around, little light keyword research. Let's think about titles, metadata, things like that. And then I wanted to just kick this thing off somehow with the details from the interview. So basically the handle on the box is spinning, and then out pops on the other side a draft that the client can turn into the finished piece. I'm going to touch on this again in a minute, but I didn't want this to be a situation where, you sort of copy, paste, publish. We don't need any more AI slop. And that's a whole thing, right? My concept was, I just want to save my client a little bit of time. I wanted my client to have a piece a draft they could be proud of, and that they can go in and edit it. So they can slash and they can cross things out. They can no, I don't like that word, or no, I want to put this extra paragraph in, or I want to move this over here, or the order of this is all wrong. I wanted to save them time, but I wanted it to be at a good enough state that they can go in and in a modest amount of time turn it into something that's truly theirs. And having been doing this now for several months, I can say that's actually exactly how it's working out. So I'm really excited about that. But that was the general workflow at the highest levels. You can imagine standing at a whiteboard, just charting this out. Here's kind of what I wanted it to do. The tools that I then used, so I experimented, I did some research, I looked around, talked to people, did a lot of YouTube and LinkedIn digging. I came to this set of tools. So Fireflies is the note taker app that I use. So Fireflies to record the interviews. They're generally 1 hour, these interviews. They could, and you can do two. I've done some where it's like an hour, and then we did a follow-up thing, or I sent questions and, got some email responses that then help me prep for the interview, etc. So use your skills. You know how to do this. And then building a custom GPT, or again, you can use a gem. I'm using a gem in another workflow similar. But anyway, you can use a custom GPT for the topic ideation. And then I use tally.so. So I use a web form to kick off my N8N workflow. So you can use other ways of doing this. But this is where I started. It was simple. It was free. And it was easy. So, tally.so, and I'll show you an example of that in a minute. But I use Tally to populate things like, what's the topic or the suggested topic, right? What's the gist of the piece? What are the supporting arguments, or what are the things you want to say? What's the meat of it? And then what's the punchline or takeaway? Why would anybody care? So what's that aspect to it? So the custom GPT will give you that. And then it's just a matter of dropping it into Tally and then hitting submit. N8N, as I mentioned, is for the overall sort of workflow orchestration. I use Perplexity to do some research around the topic, so that's part of the workflow. Data for SEO is my source of SEO data around rankings, and people also ask and things like that I use to inform the keywords to optimize inside the piece. And I use Claude for building a brief. So I didn't start the initial version this way, but where I ended up was to do this in two stages. So the first stage is to build a concise brief first, and I use Claude for that. And then the next step is to use the brief to actually generate the finished piece. I use Airtable to store client information. So, who is this ultimately going to get emailed to? Status about the run. Did it run successfully? What was the topic of the run? So I use all that on the back end to just keep track of who's getting what, because I have a few different clients now using this. So that's Airtable. And then OpenAI and the OpenAI assistant. Currently, I'm going to have to modify this because I know it's being deprecated, but the OpenAI assistant, which is basically like an online version of a custom GPT, but it actually takes the brief and builds a draft of the full post. So it does that part of it. And that thing in its knowledge base, again, are my client ICPs, the personas, examples of writing, different recommendations to try to make the piece sound as human as possible, that sort of a thing. Okay, so the thought was, could we avoid having to go to Getty Images or paying for things or spending hours in, the comments looking for stuff? So this is, sometimes you get something that looks great. It's best ignored, but every once in a while you get a gem. Maybe it saves my client a little bit of time, maybe a little bit of money. So we generate an image for the blog as well. And then lastly, I'm Google Workspace, so I'm using Google Drive and Gmail to actually send the client the piece. The workflow builds a Google Doc, and it's stored on Drive, and then they're emailed a link to that draft. So those are the tools. But I want to talk about goals and KPIs, because this is super important, and thinking about the time saved. And I spend a lot of time with my clients on this, specifically on this for the writer. We benchmarked this at a couple of my clients where there was the sort of blank sheet of paper problem. So they weren't even getting the blog post, because some people, they have all this knowledge in their head, but where do I start? How do I get it out? But then for others, they are writing, but it could take 4 to 6 hours to sort of, think about what they want to write about. And they start the process of drafting it and setting it down, picking it up, thinking about it, messing with it, and trying to get their words together. And my design goal was to get it under 1 hour. And from what I've seen across a few clients, it's in that 45-minute to an hour range, which is exactly what I was hoping for. And that's some real time savings. That's the difference between somebody being able to do this once a week or once every couple of weeks, and not at all, or once a year or once a quarter, or whatever as the case may be. I wanted this to be a way for clients to express themselves in a way that sounds like them as much as we can, So what I really didn't want to do is just like, oh, look, fully automated process. I got the topics and boom, it's actually pushing it straight to HubSpot and off you go. And I didn't want that for a variety of reasons, and neither did my clients. And the clients I've been working with have appreciated getting something that allows them to get the juices flowing. So to go from the SME interview where we're really digging into some issues, and I enjoy those calls, by the way, help a SME sort of surface nuances and get some stuff going and really dig into the lived experience of it, but then have the AI and automations bring it to life a little bit, but then give it back to the SME to like, oh yeah, and start connecting dots and like, oh, I wanted to say it this way, and look, let's move this over here. And that takes, again, about 45 minutes to an hour. And then they have something that is truly ready to publish. Okay, so let me show you what this thing looks like and how it works. The start is Tally. So this is just a web form. There's nothing terribly fancy about this. It's free and you can use it to do a whole bunch of things, but it uses webhooks that can get things started. And so that's what I've used. And I'll just show you the fields. It's super simple. So this comes pre-populated. You could see I had to learn how to do this. So I can specify who the client is. In this case, it's me. But I can pass that in the URL and it populates here. And what I do here is I add in the working title or the main topic. So I can either just sit here and drive this. I can have this written down in my notes. I can have this in, say, Evernote or something else. Or, as I mentioned, you could be using a gem or you could be using a custom GPT that's either parsing your ideas or your client's ideas or whatever. But what I've done is I take the transcript, load it up to the custom GPT, and it says, oh, here's 3 or 4 or 5 topics for you to consider. Go back and forth around any one of those topics, and you can think about how you might want to score them or rank them. But either way, you select one, and then you ask it to generate, as I've done in my custom GPT, ask it to ultimately generate the tally data inputs, and then it'll structure it exactly as you see here. So you drop in the suggested title, what you want to say. So this is just the concept, right? So this is just at the highest level. What's the gist of the piece? What do you want to say? What's in your head? What's the theme, if you will? Now, I've also included an option here to just get the brief. What I'm telling you about now is getting the finished draft of the entire blog, like the full blog draft. But if you just wanted the briefs, and this happens from time to time, where it's, oh, you know what, give me the brief, let me just chew on that. I can print it out, I can mark it up, I can think about it. Or maybe I just want to write it myself from that, and I've seen that too. So you could put yes or no here. That's fine. And then you drop in the key arguments. Now, this could be pretty significant. This could be a big piece of content to paste in here. But it would be either you and your notes, like I said, or it could be coming from the custom GPT like I have with my clients. And it'll be 3 to 7 or 8 different main arguments or points or observations or findings or whatever it is, whatever it happens to be. Like, this is the meat of the post. This is the rubber hits the road of what you want to talk about and how any of this supports the topic. So once you drop that in, then you can drop in a takeaway or conclusion. So what's the punchline? So my thing with the writing is, and I'm not a writer, this is just the way I think about stuff, is who cares? So you write this post, there are a lot of blog posts out there. Why should anybody care about any of this? So what's the big takeaway? How does the reader walk away a little bit smarter than when they showed up? And so what is that conclusion that you want to be unambiguous in terms of the value you're hoping that your reader walks away with after they read the piece? So you drop that in, and it could be a sentence or two. And then you submit the blog post ideas. You click that button, and that fires off the workflow, which I'll show you. Okay, now the moment you've all been waiting for, the nodes, the N8N nodes. Here they are. There's, I don't know, 45, 46 of them, something like that. And what I wanted to do is walk you through them. So one of the things, again, that I struggled with when I first got started with all of this and looking at videos on YouTube and running around and was trying to understand what these things did, why they flowed one into the other, why certain things were chosen and not others, or why a certain sequence of nodes and actions. And I want to take a little bit of time to step through this with you and maybe open up a couple of these things and kind of walk you through the why of it and tie that back to the original, the business case, basically, which was the first part of this video. So with that, let's sort of jump in. So you could see here, This has sort of been chunked out into a logical flow. So these are the major blocks of the workflow. So the first thing is getting the input from tally.s. So we just looked at that form that connects to N8N via this webhook. So when you submit the form in Tally, it triggers this workflow. So the first thing that happens is the information in those fields gets pushed here to N8N. Now that's got to get parsed. And if you see these brackets, that means these are code nodes. So these are JavaScript nodes. So the data comes in from Tally and it gets processed by these code nodes. And I'll open up one so you could see. So you could see there's information coming in. This is the input side. So information's coming in from Tally. It's getting parsed here via JavaScript in this code node. And then there's an output. So if this were running for real, this would be processing it, and then you'd see an output on this side. Now, I'm doing all of this in JavaScript. I think you can also use Python, but JS seems to work best for me. And I traditionally have used Claude as my coding helper. So I don't know how to, if somebody were to ask me to code this up from scratch, I'd have nothing. So Claude is my friend and my guide in this. And typically, because I loved ideating things and getting cracking with Claude, I could sometimes get into what I would call Claude debugging hell. And so what I wound up doing is using Claude for creating and ideating and doing the first pass. And then if I run into trouble, I would use Gemini to debug with me. But now with Opus 4.6, I found in other things I've been doing that it's working a little bit better, and I'm able to just complete the whole thing with Claude, and I haven't needed to go to Gemini as much. But in any case, you might decide to approach this in different ways. And some of you might be saying this whole thing is bonkers. Just have the agent in N8N just build it for me. And maybe that can work too. But I like getting my hands dirty. I like, the sort of dirt under the fingernails concept of this. I like wiring things together. I like to build things like in my personal life, but also here too. And it helps me understand at a granular level how all this stuff works and why one type of approach versus another approach, or in just making sure that there's fidelity back to my original goals for this and design for this, that conceptual plan at the whiteboard, if you will, that I was talking about in a moment ago. So we come in, we disentangle what we get from Tally, we parse it into specific variables that can flow down for these other things we're doing. You could see here this little symbol is Airtable. So what's happening there is we go to Airtable and we get that information I mentioned earlier. So what client is this for? Because that gets passed from Tally. In this case, it's me and my consultancy, but it could be one of my other clients. It gets who should the brief or the post go to. So an email address basically and the name of the person. And it also gets what is basically the ID for the assistant in OpenAI. So that means that each one of these assistants in OpenAI, and again, they kind of behave like custom GPTs, each one is different for every client, and each one has its own ID. So I need to understand what ID that is, so that way when that client runs this flow for themselves, we're using the right assistant, because each assistant is trained on a different set of things. So because each client is different, we need different assistants. And so each one has unique ID. So that's pulled down as well from Airtable. So now what happens is we flow to a couple branches, as you can see. So we have a branch up here and a branch down there. So this branch is getting Perplexity ready to do its thing. So one of the things I learned is that you can't do everything in the node that actually calls the various APIs, in this case Perplexity. So what does that mean? That means sometimes you have to sort of detangle things a little bit or make things less complex so that when you get to the actual node that's doing the HTTP request or there's otherwise an API node, you're giving it discrete things. Like maybe you've moved things around or you've made sure your naming conventions are right. There's a variety of prepping that needs to be done. So that's what these code nodes are for. I can tell you that Claude suggested I do it this way, and it's been working great. So thank you, Claude. So you can see there's a couple nodes to get ready to make the call to Perplexity. That happens here. And then we deal with whatever Perplexity gives us in return. And we're asking it to do research based on the topics. We're asking it to identify any citations that could be relevant or links to other sites and content that could be relevant to the piece. And that's something I personally believe in, and as part of just good practice for writing a blog, is considering other credible sources to either bolster your case, or maybe there's a countervailing view, and maybe there's a reason why that might be useful to sort of like highlight or reference another voice in around the topic that you're writing about. I just think that makes for a good user experience, and just bolsters credibility. So I wanted to replicate those elements in the design of this workflow. Now that's this top flow. Down here, what we're doing is we're going to data for SEO. And again, here we're taking the topics that we suggested that came in from Tally, and we're sending it to data for SEO to get keyword data, to get rankings, to look at people also ask, and to bring that information back. And then all that gets merged back together here. So in this merge, we're bringing back Perplexity's research, we're bringing back keyword recommendations from data for SEO, and we're continuing to move down our workflow. So now we're getting ready to go to Claude. So we're combining all that information with this code node and getting it all parsed out and ready. Now we build the prompt for Claude. So here, we're setting the personas, context, content categories, with the system prompt itself, create a comprehensive content brief in JSON format with these sections, all that good stuff. That system prompt gets built in this node. That gets pushed to Claude. So Claude's instructions is to create that brief. You just saw the system prompt. Then we get a response back from Claude. So we get that brief back. So if this were running live, you see the little spinning dial here. And then once that's done, now we have to get ready to basically go to OpenAI and use the assistant there. But first, we have to check to see if we're creating a brief or if we're going to do the whole blog draft. Now, if you remember back in Tally, there was a yes or no, there's a drop down yes or no. Do you just want the brief to help you think things through or whatever? And if you were to say no, then it would just give you the full blog draft. If you said yes, then you would actually head up to this branch here. So sometimes I or a client, they just want the brief and they want to write it themselves, or they want to sit with it, they want to cross things out, they want to think about things, all that good stuff. And if that's the case, then they're up here, and basically this set of nodes creates a Google Doc, so it puts the brief in the Google Doc, we're formatting things, we're updating, so you create the Google Doc, then you populate the Google Doc, and then ultimately you email it, and then you hit Airtable to basically say it's done, as you can see. Down here, though, we're going to go to OpenAI. So what I learned the hard way is that there's a 4-step process when you use the Assistant API. And this is getting deprecated. It has been deprecated. So I have to update my workflow to reflect the new approach. But the original way, it was a 4-step process. So you basically create a new thread, almost like a new job with OpenAI to use the assistant. You then add your message to it. So what is it that you want it to do? So we would be pushing the instructions to take this brief and generate a blog post with it. Then you run it. So you kick it off, and that's this piece here. But then the last piece is while it's running, you have to check to see if it's done. So there's a wait node here. So it's about 5 seconds. And it could be whatever you want. But it's wait 5 seconds, then check if it's done. And then increment a counter, and then go around again. So if it's not done, so is it done? You go this way. If it's not done, you come around again. What this if node does, it says, was there an error? So maybe you got through, you checked the status, and it's yes, it stopped, but it errored out. So this will email me and say, hey, your thing broke, go figure it out. If there's no error, it comes around again, and you wait 5 more seconds, check if it's done, and off you go. Sometimes when I run this in the middle of the night, it just flies right through, maybe once or twice around this loop, and it's done. Sometimes during the day, it can go 7 or 8 times and before it's done. So what this if node does as well, it says if you've reached some crazy number of in the counter, I can't remember what the number is, 20 or something like that, then something must have broke, and I get an email, hey, your thing broke. So now we get the blog post, we pull it down, we extract the ideogram, prompt. So part of what OpenAI Assistant is also going to do is give us a prompt for Ideogram. And I mentioned I liked Ideogram, although I might try, it's good to try different tools, but for now I'm using Ideogram. But anyway, it extracts that from the output from OpenAI, from the assistant. Meanwhile, we use some code, some JavaScript here to format the output and create the post and format it and get it the way we want it. So it's got the title, it's got the body, and it's set off this way. Then we have suggested meta description down here, the keywords, the links, etc. So it just formats all of that. We bring it all back together to keep moving down the process. We add in the email information. So this is the information that we need to know who to send this to, whether it's me, if it's Prism Inspire, is it my client, and who is that, Susie@client.com, whatever it is. So that gets added in. And then we generate the image at Ideogram itself. So unlike what I just described for the OpenAI assistant, Ideogram works a little bit differently. Here you send the prompt, so that's what's happening in this node. So we're hitting that API. And you don't have to wait. It goes and does its thing. Now, if you've used AI to generate images, that can take a little bit of time. But what happens here is you send the prompt for it to start generating the image, but then it gives you the URL for that image right away. So even though it might take a beat or two for the actual picture to emerge, to be created, the URL is pushed back straight away so we can keep going. So while that's happening, we create the doc, and now we have the URL for the image, we have all the other information that came in from the OpenAI assistant. We create the doc, we move it to where it needs to be based on the client, we populate the doc, we prepare the email that's going to get sent. Oh, your draft is ready. Here's a link to it. And then it gets sent, and then the final step is to log the completion in Airtable so I can keep track of which clients got what and what the title was and all that kind of stuff. Okay, and lastly, I just wanted to show you what the output looks like, and this is raw. I would take this and so backing up, this is a blog for my own site, so this is my own content, but this is literally the raw output that I got from the workflow, and I would take this and I would edit it, and in fact I did move some things around. I work with a marketing team, so they might have some input on this as well. So basically, this is where I would hope my clients would be, which is something that's really, really workable. That 30 minutes or so, or 40 minutes of editing and personalizing and tweaking could get it to where they want to go. But you could see it's not terribly fancy, but it's a great place to start. And it's got my supporting arguments, in these cases, a series of rules around having a senior leadership team and things like that. But how to implement things, it's got recommendations in here, and some of this stuff I might like, some of this stuff I might want to edit. It depends. It's got final thoughts, basically the punchline. You can see the ideogram prompt here. So that's that. And then it's got recommendations for the metadata, so titles, meta descriptions, primary keyword, and the link to the generated image. So that's back to Ideogram again. So that's it. This is what gets pushed over. The whole run from clicking submit and tally to getting to this point takes between 2 minutes and 5 minutes, if that. And like I said, I've been running this for some time for a few different clients, and it works great. So the key takeaway here is you can jump in, you can start to wire this stuff up. A tool like Claude or Gemini or OpenAI, this is a preference, right? So you can use ChatGPT. I've used ChatGPT to build some things. I've just found Claude and I just seem to work well together. So that's my preference. And probably in a year, this will all be an anachronism, and I would just go into N8N or go to Claude Code and just say, this is what I want, and then the whole thing just gets built and off we go. But for now, I like building with N8N and Claude, and I've been able to build a number of different things, which I'm going to share with you guys over time. So the last thing I would say is, for those of you who really know what you're doing, if you stuck around to the end of this thing, you're like, oh man, you could have collapsed this, combined that, you did it the hard way here, and you are right. So one of the things that I've discovered that I want to try is a tool called Softer that instead of Tally, I could give my clients basically something they can log into and it can tell them how many posts they've created. It can do a bunch of different, they can kick off the job from inside, basically an authenticated sort of UI, basically. That's on my list to learn more about. But in the meantime, Tally works just fine. So I hope this helped you. I hope it inspired one or two of you to give this a go. And I will see you next time.